sure they would be able to join us for future meetings starting up in November. So just wanted to flag that that we will be having regular meetings, and we'll be going over that schedule with you momentarily. But just wanted to introduce myself and the Department of Planning and Development team. We are also joined by Joanne Phoebe. Joanne, do you want to say anything?
Hey, I'm Joanne Phoebe with the Department of Planning and Development in the Community Revitalization section, and I am the Revitalization Program Manager for the corridor.
Excellent. And then we also have a couple of folks from FCDOT, the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. So Bob, do you want to introduce yourself as well as your colleagues?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I am Bob Pecora. I work, as Graham had mentioned, with Fairfax County Department of Transportation. And I'm joined here with Tom Burke and Kyle Kelly. The three of us will be working to review the transportation analysis and also providing comment on the plan amendment and interacting with you all during the process, during this process. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm Kyle Kelly with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, and I'll also be assisting with the review of the transportation analysis. So looking forward to working with you all.
And I'm Tom Burke, Fairfax County DOT. I work with Bob and Kyle.
I think that's all the stack we have. Aaron, you want to?
Okay.
I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you everyone again for coming. Could we go to the next slide? Okay. So the agenda for tonight is we're going to first go over just very briefly the task force procedures, why you're all here and we're all here, and how the meeting flow is going to work, and so on and so forth. And then Leah will start with a brief overview of comprehensive planning in general. And that included in that will be an overview of the SSPA process, where we've been and where we are now. And then we will introduce the two local plan amendments that the task force is going to be considering in the next few months. So, so for the, if we can go to the next slide, sorry. So basically, the Mount Vernon Task Force was convened by Supervisor Stork to review the plan amendments on the 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program. And this task force is going to be making recommendations to the Planning Commission and directly to Supervisor Stork, along with staff. And so basically the way that the decision-making process, or the way the meetings are going to go, is there will be presentations of by staff, the nominators, and then discussion by the task force, and then time for public comment, usually at the end of each meeting. And basically, staff will be presenting analysis of the proposals. We'll be talking about different topics like land use and transportation and so on. We'll get more into that in the presentation. And then the task force will discuss that data, that information, and eventually, and there will be presentations, detailed presentations by the nominators, and then eventually at the last meeting, the very last meeting, we will be, well, at some point we'll help you present or develop a draft task force recommendation, and we'll present a draft staff recommendation on each of the plan amendments. And then there'll be a vote on the task force on their recommendation at the last meeting. So that's the basic flow of how that's going to go. And there'll be a task. Walter Clark is the task force chair. He'll be kind of running the meetings. And as you saw in that document that we circulated, you know, loosely based on Robert's Rules of Orders and so on and so forth. I'm sure you've all been in enough meetings to know how that process works. One thing I'm going to ask for you to do tonight is for someone to volunteer to be the task force secretary. The secretary is going to be taking general notes, but the most important function is to record the task force votes on a task force report form, which we'll provide to you. And that'll also have general notes, on the discussion of the amendment and changes made, motions made, changes made to a draft task force recommendation, so on and so forth. And the task force chair will also need to sign those forms. So, and we will post those on the website. Those will be publicly available. So I guess at this point, does anyone wish to volunteer for this position? And we're going to be recording these meetings too, so don't worry about having to take really detailed notes. No takers. Okay. Well, then
Aaron, what we might do is we'll have a couple more task force members that join us at the next meeting. I believe that Tamara Schrader may have joined us as well. I was looking at the roll call. Tamara, do you hear us?
I do hear you. I'm just trying to drive and get home, but I'm
Okay.
here. So thanks for, I'm with the Huntington Community Association.
Okay, sounds good. So what we can do once Walter is back at the following meeting is we can talk about kind of more formalized roles for officers for the task force maybe at the next meeting. Unless there's any takers for secretary, it's a pretty easy role. It's just taking action minutes. So if there's no takers, we'll take it up at the next meeting.
Okay. Well, then let's move on. All right, I will turn it over to Leah now to do the introduction to the comprehensive plan.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Okay, as Aaron said, I'm just going to go over the introduction of the comprehensive plan, kind of a one-on-one, so that we all have kind of the same, coming in with the same knowledge and basis for what we're doing here. Let's get the next slide. So this is just to provide a sense of where this project is in terms of the development process. So this diagram illustrates kind of the cyclical nature of land development within the county. So first starting with the concept phase, and these two plan amendments submitted their concepts last year through the SSPA process. And this included initial screening, which included a series of community meetings, and I know some of you attended that. And then along with a workshop of Planning Commission to determine whether the proposal should advance to the formal planning phase. And the planning study for this site was authorized for review in April. So now we're in the green zone stage. And this is the comprehensive plan along with the zoning and entitlement process. And these are the first steps in this year-long process. So we just wanted to reiterate that we're really just in the beginning of this. And then, sorry, slight delays. And then before we get into the two plan amendments, we kind of just want to start with the main object of our process, which is the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is really a guide for decision making about the built and natural environment that reflects the community's kind of vision for the future. And the purpose of the comprehensive plan is to manage the growth and development. So it's really, looking to balance and preservation of other resources such as environmental and heritage resources. And then growth brings both, benefits and challenges in terms of land use and housing and transportation. So it's really looking at those. And then just to reiterate, the plan is also a legally required document in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So every, county or locality must have one. And however, it is important to note that the plan provides recommendations and is not law like the zoning ordinance. And the recommendations in the comprehensive plan are used by the Board of Supervisors, Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals, county staff, and the community as the common basis for the decision making on the land use applications. So it really is a living document, and the changes to it are these plan amendments that we'll be looking at. And then looking more into it, the comprehensive plan in Fairfax County is divided into 3 basic parts. So the first part is the policy plan volume, and this provides countywide policies and objectives on pretty much on 11 board topics such as land use, transportation, the environment, public facilities, housing, economic development, and many others. And then the second part of the comprehensive plan are the area plan volumes. And these are divided into 4 geographic areas and contain elements intended to implement the policy plan at a more detailed level. So these area plans are further broken down into planning districts and community planning sectors for specific areas, such as the Huntington Transit Station area, and then the Richmond Highway Corridor, and then other places around the county. And then within these districts and sectors, there are many cases, site-specific recommendations. And then the third element of the comprehensive plan are a series of maps, such as the comprehensive land use map, the transportation plan map, the trails and bike network map. And then one of the most important elements of the comprehensive plan is the map shown on the slide here, which is called the Concept for Future Development Map. And this is really the overarching guide for the area plans. So the concept's policy direction in the area plans, which is illustrated in the map, is for almost all future growth and development to occur within the designated mixed-use centers. And then there are a number of land classifications shown on the map that embody different types of mixed-use centers. A few that I'll highlight that are important for tonight's discussion are the beige-colored transit station areas, which are areas influenced by the Metro Rail station, and then also the community business centers shown in red, which includes the PennDOT CBC plan amendment, and then areas outside of these mixed-use centers, such as the yellow suburban neighborhood classifications, are areas where little to no change is planned. And then just going back, here's examples of the community planning districts and the sectors that I was referring to, how it's kind of broken down even more. So both plan amendments are in the Mount Vernon Planning District, and then they're further broken down into different community planning sectors. So Cityside is under the Huntington Transit Station Area Community Planning Sector, while the PennDOT CBC falls under the Richmond Highway Corridor area. And then getting into some terminology, there are a variety of common terms used in the comprehensive plan, and 2 of the most common terms are the density and intensity. And these are terms that refer to the quantity of development, and it'll be used in our later discussion on the plan amendments. And to provide kind of a better idea as to this, residential density is most often measured in dwelling units per acre. So fewer dwelling units per acre is a less dense development. And so, for example, a single family detached dwelling is often located in a 1 to 2 or 3 to 4 dwelling unit per acre. And then it's also considered low density development, whereas townhomes often have a higher densities. And then multifamily is often at a higher density of 12 plus dwelling units per acre. And so this slide kind of just depicts various types of housing and then the densities that they're often associated with. And then for non-residential intensity, it's often measured as a floor area ratio, so FAR, which is obtained by dividing the floor area of the building by the total land area. So for mixed-use communities, which containing both residential and non-residential uses, are also identified by a maximum FAR. So similar to density, the lower number, the less intense the development. So for example, development around the Huntington Metro Station area have a planned FAR of 1.0, and this really equates to a total building size that is equal to the size of the parcel. That could take a variety of forms. For example, a 2-story building covering half the parcel, or a 4-story building covering 1/4 of the parcel, as seen in the image. So in a nutshell, a higher FAR is indicative of a larger scale development. Here are a few examples of that. So, just reiterating, like density, the lower the number, the less intense the development. So here we have an auto-oriented retail, such as the Bellevue Shopping Center, is less intense at a 0.3 FAR versus a pedestrian-oriented mixed-use development with surrounding parking seen under the medium category begin to get to the 1.0 FAR or a higher range. And then you have your urban transit station areas with high-rise construction, and that can reach over 3.0 FAR. So that's just to illustrate that. And then, as I noted earlier, the plan is guide, it's not law, and it provides recommendations about land use, transportation, environment, and other topics generally. The plan is implemented through zoning, which is the law, and there are more specific standards that can be found, such as regulations for setbacks, open space, building heights, and explicit uses. So changes to the zoning map are requested through the redevelopment process, and during this process, proposals are evaluated for conformance with the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. So this is really just to illustrate those two, and what's examined, what's reviewed under each. And then talking about public engagement, much of the work that the department does relies on outreach and coordination with the community and elected and appointed officials. So whether it's a comprehensive plan or a zoning ordinance amendment or a rezoning application, a large part of our job is ensuring that the community is fully aware of any proposed changes, and soliciting input and corresponding it in a meaningful way. So the county's public engagement process is quite extensive. So the community can get involved in our planning and zoning practices in a variety of ways, such as, the public is invited to propose changes to the comprehensive plan through the SSPA process. And then staff actively seeks community comment during the plan and zoning amendment stage, just like here. And then community members may sit on a standing land use committees. Most magisterial districts have one. And then another one is community members may sit on a special study task force or advisory group, such as this one. And then the comprehensive plan can be located online. And here's where you can find it on the website. This PowerPoint will be posted online, so this link will be available after tonight. And then here's some additional resources for information on the comprehensive plan, and where you can get kind of news and other events about ongoing planning efforts. And this will also be posted online, so you can access these links. And then now I'm going to pass it on to Erin to go over the SSPA process.
Thank you, Leah. So the county SSPA process provides an opportunity for the public to propose a land use change, which we call a nomination, to the comprehensive plan for a single site or a collection of parcels. And the goal of SSPA is to provide the community with an active role in shaping the long-term vision of the county. And SSPA has been in place since 2017. The process underwent an evaluation over the course of the past year that resulted in changes to reduce the overall timeline of review, enhance community engagement, and achieve a better balance of resources on site-specific amendments and other types of long-range planning studies, such as area-wide studies and county-wide policy plan amendments. Prior to SSPA, many of you may be familiar and may have participated in the area plans review process, which was or APR process, which was a similar type of site-specific review. So as mentioned previously, the comprehensive plan is a living document, and proposed changes to it are called plan amendments. The planning department has a list known as the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program. And the list is proposed amendments and studies that staff is assigned to work on as directed by the Board of Supervisors. There are 4 types of amendments, all of which are listed on the work program. Countywide policy plan amendments, such as the Affordable Housing Preservation Policy that was recently adopted, deal with changes to the policy plan. Others deal with different geographies at an area-wide level, such as the Embark Richmond Highway Corridor Plan or the ongoing Lorton Visioning Study that's happening now. And then there are amendments at the site-specific level, which can be proposed through the cyclical SSPA process or separately authorized directly by the Board of Supervisors. So as mentioned previously, those nominations that made it through the screening phase all the way to the left on this graphic and were subsequently added to the comprehensive work program by the board became active plan amendment studies. And the work program phase includes interaction between county staff, plan amendment nominators, and the public through a variety of public forums. Nominators will present detailed proposals to amend the comprehensive plan, and staff will develop and present detailed analyses of land use, transportation, environmental, public facilities, and other potential community needs and benefits generated by each proposal. During discussions with the community at public meetings, staff recommendations, and in our case, you, the task force, will also make recommendations that will be developed and will be forwarded to the Planning Commission. These recommendations could be to retain the current plan recommendations, to adopt the plan amendment proposal as submitted, or in a modified form. Staff and the task force do not need to be in agreement. They can make different recommendations to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will make its own recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. The commission may take either the staff's recommendation, the task force recommendation, or a combination of the two in formulating its recommendation to the board. The Board of Supervisors makes the final decision to either retain the current plan recommendations or to adopt a plan amendment proposal and amend the comprehensive plan. The board may formulate its decision based on a combination, again, of the staff, task force, and planning commission recommendations, and it also may make changes and formulate its own unique recommendation. Of note, again, the work program phase may not apply for the city side plan amendment, pending more information for consistency with the housing preservation, affordable housing preservation policy. And if that is the case, the work program stage isn't the only opportunity, though, for you to participate in the review and engage with the developer. You have the whole rezoning process where more details will be discussed, and you will get a chance as a community to participate in what happens with that. So again, typically when I say that staff does analyses of different kinds of things, what we're talking about is we work with our other staff partners and other county agencies, and again, we give them the proposals, the plan amendment proposals. And so we ask questions like, how should the site develop in the future? What are the benefits and the impacts to the community? And then we will share this data and these analyses with you at the different task force meetings. And these are the different types of areas that we look at. As we mentioned, land use and transportation, but we also look at all of these other areas as well. And so this is the general schedule for these task force meetings. This is a little different than the one that we gave you in the task force procedures document. And the first thing I'll say about this is, of course, this is subject to change depending on how many meetings we need to go through the different analyses that we present to you. If additional information is needed, we can add meetings to this schedule and so on. Again, please note that the proposal for the city side Huntington site may be determined to be consistent with the board's affordable housing preservation policy. And if so, determined, a plan amendment would not be necessary, and that would be removed from the schedule here. And again, that proposal will still need a zoning application, and the public can be involved in that as well. Okay, so just to introduce the plan amendments here. So 6 plan amendments were added to the 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program for the Mount Vernon District as a result of the SSPA screening phase, as I mentioned. And the first 2 that are shown on the map, again, the Cityside Huntington and PennDOS CBC Land Unit C projects are scheduled for review by the task force over the next several months. And these are considered the highest priority amendments in terms of supporting county goals and in terms of devotion of staff resources and so on. Now, the others on this list are considered second or third in priority. Some of these are either relatively simple proposals that don't really need a task force review, but could include general community meetings. That would be like the Shops of Lorton amendment here. And some of these could be recommended for review once a concurrent rezoning application is submitted, or will be considered for review with previously submitted amendments that have similar policy considerations, or some of these may be preempted by a larger policy study. That would be, an example would be the I-95 Industrial Corridor Amendment here, and we are doing a larger policy study on industrial uses countywide. Okay. All right. So what Leah and I are going to do then is, in this next phase of the presentation, is we'll introduce like the existing conditions and locate the different plan amendments, and then we will turn it over to the nominators for so that they can make a more detailed presentation. So I'll start off with the PennDOS CBC Land Unit C study here. So this map is showing that it's located on the west side of Richmond Highway. It's adjacent to the Fairhaven single family neighborhood. It is also abutting the Cityside Huntington Plan Amendment subject area on the south. And then across Richmond Highway are the Oarsman Ford and Spring Hill Suites properties. So I just want to the next couple slides are just calling out some important factors that you should all be aware of, and this goes really for both of the plan amendment subject areas. The first one here is showing elevation, changes in elevation, and for the city side property, there's a gradual upslope from Richmond Highway to the rear of the site with an almost 40-foot gain in elevation. And similarly for the Days Inn and Hawaiian Pools properties, the PennDOS properties directly to the south, there are steep slopes located along the property line with the adjacent Fairhaven neighborhood of single family homes. And again, it's about a 40-foot change in elevation right at the property line there. And those slopes contain thick vegetation and tree cover. And then this slide is showing the existing tree cover on both of the subject areas. Again, you can see again that heavy vegetation along the property line with Fairhaven for the PennDOS area. And then there's, for the Cityside site, there's a little bit more vegetation along its northern property line there. So for the PennDOS CBC study, it's about 6.5 acres in size, and the existing buildings or conditions on the site include the Days Inn, the Moon Inn, the Hawaiian Pool Contractor, a tobacco retail store, and a 7-Eleven, and then some undeveloped land. Okay, next slide. And again, this is within Land Unit C of PennDOS CBC, and the adopted plan recommendation for this area is office use up to 150,000 gross square feet. And I should note again that the Days Inn and the Hawaiian Pools property are really the only properties within the CBC Land Unit C here that are going to be, that have a proposal for a change for land use. The other properties, we were not able to get the participation of those property owners, so those properties will remain planned for office. And the map, I'm sorry, just could you go back one slide there, Leah? Okay, thanks. And I've circled again the land unit C here on the map on the right side, bottom right side of the page here. Okay, go ahead. So the board authorized for the plan amendment for staff to consider basically recommendations for the appropriate mix of land uses and densities or intensities for the entire land unit C area. That's the basic authorization for this plan amendment. The picture on the right was the initial concept plan that we received. And the nominator's presentation, I believe, will have an updated version of this, so I'm not going to go into that too much. At the bottom of the slide here, again, is the schedule of review. And we're anticipating, again, the public hearings in the spring of 2024. Okay, now I will turn it over to Mark Viani, who is representing the nominators for PennDOT. And let me just take a moment to bring up his presentation.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. In the interest of full disclosure, we had an IT issue where XO Communications merged with Verizon today, and in the process of doing so, wiped out our website and all our access to the thing. So Aaron is going to be, it'll be interesting conversations tomorrow. So Aaron is kind enough to be the person who's going to kind of move my PowerPoint up here because I can't do it myself right now because we don't have extra site. But yeah, thank you very much. I think Aaron did a pretty good summary of the basic history of this. This is, we are in the PennDOT CBC. We're in, this land bay. We are probably the two most best positioned properties for redevelopment, given the size of the properties, their contiguity to each other. Probably one of the most distinguishing features of this property. We can keep going down, probably a couple slides down here. I think a lot of this is repeating what you've already heard. Exactly. Let's stop right there. Is, probably the most distinguishing feature of this property is really the change in grade. You have two uses on there that are pretty historic, pretty old uses. The Hawaiian Spa Pool, the dates from the late 40s, early 50s site, and then the Days Inn is about 1970 time frame. Both are dated, old, certainly not reflective of what we want to the appearance on Richmond Highway. And as Aaron pointed out, probably as you go they're at grade on Richmond Highway, as you go deeper into the lot, if you're on the pool spot, the shortest drop is about 35 feet, 35 to about 40 feet. Then as you go further deeper into the thing, where kind of the northern, where you see that kind of bluer trapezoid, and you get further deeper in, I would call it west here, but it's really looking kind of the top of the trapezoid. Up to there, it's about 50, 55 feet in terms of change in grade. And that's right where the beginning where the Fairhaven community is, that you have that area that's heavily wooded. And so the goal here is to essentially try to preserve that wooded area, preserve that slope, so the buffer remains. Now, I will say and I know Garrett's listening and the folks there, is if a project does come forward with this, we have gone through there. There's a lot of invasives out of there. So, it would probably involve cleaning out some invasives, but then that would involve replanting that as well. But the goal ultimately is to have essentially take what is kind of a rundown face of Richmond Highway, convert it into a face that, looking kind of like along the scale of what you see with the Shelby, those kinds of apartment buildings, and providing a firm buffer between that and actually protecting kind of the Fairhaven community too, with the landscape buffer and the hill, but also, providing a firm buffer between them and Richmond Highway. Let's go to the next slide. And again, this kind of shows you some of the change in grades. You get down to, the corner of the southern corner of the Hawaiian Spa place, which on this thing is kind of the left-hand side of your screen. The change in grade there really goes from 90 feet at the street level to about 120 feet. So about 40 feet. And then you get further into the road up there, it goes from 90 feet to about 145, but 145 feet. It's about 55 feet. So the goal is to keep that wood. We'd have to do the invasives, we'd have to do the replanting, we'd have to do the stabilization, end up providing a nice big robust buffer there. But the area where the buildings are right now, where the parking lots are right now, that's the area that we're proposing to redevelop as part of a new apartment building. And you saw in Aaron's presentation kind of our first draft of it. And the goal is basically have about 5 to 6 story apartment building with a structured parking garage in the center of it. Can we go to the next slide? This is just another supposed to be a 3D view from Google, but you can see, again, you can see kind of the distinguishing feature again is this treed landscape buffer that provides, a shield from the Fairhaven community, to the properties on Richmond Highway. Our goal is to preserve that. If you look immediately to the kind of the southwestern corner of the screen here, we do abut next to the Huntington Tower site. We're looking at about 5 or 6 stories. I believe that tower there is about 8 stories. So the goal basically being to kind of step down further between there, take advantage of the grade as you get down to the Fairhaven community. Can we go down further? And also, well, actually, we go back up one there. The other part is the goal. You'll see is you can see one of the historical problems we've had is this access road that runs along the front of the property. And because it is a VDOT right of way, people are allowed to basically just park trucks there. And so that's part of the problem we've had with kind of the unsightliness. And the goal is to work with the county, work with VDOT, end up providing ultimately the kind of right of way that the Richmond Highway Planning calls for. But to the extent that we can eliminate that access point right there, bring the building up closer so it's fronting on Richmond Highway, a better street presence, and eliminate that kind of parking of, you've seen things from food trucks to I've seen derelict vehicles to 18-wheelers. We have the same problem actually up to get further south down by the Target as well. But kind of looking at to clean up that portion of the highway as well. All right, next slide. Oops. Yeah. And so this is kind of unfortunately with this thing, you can't see if you can kind of vision that green triangular area, that's the Fairhaven community. So this is one concept we're kind of looking at here where, again, you have 5 to 6 stories of residential, with a parking garage in the center of it. And then you have, amenities around the back and amenities in the center. We've looked at things doing like small pocket parks, a dog park, things of that nature. Again, this is something as we get further into this process, we would look for it. One of the reasons we like this property a lot is because, the proximity to the Richmond Highway, the proximity to the transportation amenities. You're about 0.6 miles away from the metro station, but you're also just about 0.3 miles away from the BRT station when the BRTs start coming in. So we like that a lot, but this is kind of one of the notional ideas we're looking at doing. As you can see, it's kind of on the scale. I think I'd probably look at like the Shelby is probably a good idea in terms of what you're looking at least that's what we're proposing right now. We go to the next slide. Again, this is that same design right now, just looking at it from a different angle. So in this case, you're looking kind of northeast, and again, trying to keep the building away from where the landscape buffer is and the slope, preserving that, and just kind of using this design to fill in the space that's already developed. And then of course, obviously, we'd be doing the modern stormwater management controls and things like that. But bringing the building up close to Richmond Highway, pulling the building away from the buffer and from the slope, and there's that. That's where we are right now in terms of a notional design. Next slide. And so, we a lot of this is our things Aaron's already talked about, what the comp plan recommends. Talk about a height of 50 feet, 5 stories, 150 square feet of office space there. We're looking at, unfortunately, we found out, through the February 2010 Economic Development Authority study that, office is just not a foreseeable use for at least 10 years, probably more so, given the way current trends are going. So, that use doesn't really resonate. That use, yes, it's applicable to the entirety of the land bay. Practically speaking, the only place you could really do that, you couldn't do that on the Moon Inn site. You couldn't do it on where the 7-Eleven is. It's really supposed to be for this site, and so that's where we're looking to kind of change that use and replace it with something along the nature of this. And so the goal is to provide, this is high-end market rate housing. It would provide an affordable housing component, as required by county law, and providing on-site amenities, taking advantage of the proximity to Richmond Highway, and hopefully attempt to kind of beautify that portion of the highway and add additional residential options for people in the area. Next slide.
I think that's it.
Okay, there you go. So with that, that's really all we have. Fairly simple at this point. The goal is, this is kind of the initial starting point. We're on kind of square zero, and the goal is to work with the task force as we go forward. Hopefully a couple months in, we probably look at start preparing a rezoning application. And so, we could work together with the community, work together with the task force, both on the comp plan amendment, get the comp plan amendment approved, and have a rezoning that comes in line with whatever the deal we strike is within the comp plan amendment. So thank you very much for your time.
Before we advance to the next thing, it might be good if we checked with everybody and see if there were any questions about either the proposal or the prior information that we provided on the comprehensive planning. Happy to answer any questions before we kind of jump to the next thing. We threw a lot of slides at you. We're about to throw a couple more, so this might be a good time to check in on that.
This is Ray Novitsky. I do have a couple of questions on the process that was described earlier. This task force includes staff members as well as community members, correct? And then the staff are the staff members that are on this task force going to be the staff members that come up with the staff recommendations?
Yeah, good question, Ray. So the staff that are present here are all Fairfax County staff. I believe we might also have staff from the Mount Vernon Supervisor's Office. We're here in an advisory role to just help facilitate the meetings with the chair, but we don't have a vote, so to speak. We're not members of the task force. It's a citizen-based task force as appointed by Supervisor Stork. So we're here to help you and help develop your recommendation, but we're not members of the task force. To your second question, we will have our own staff recommendation, which we'll eventually put into a staff report. And later, in later meetings, further into the future, we'll provide those to you. And those may be of assistance as the task force develops its own recommendation. I think Aaron may have mentioned this, but in most instances, we on the staff end will try to work with the task force to try to come to a consensus whenever possible about a recommendation. So if there seems to be a general consensus amongst the task force and staff, that's a part of the process, is trying to find the right balance in terms of our recommendations. So we'll be there with you along the way to help you as you think through these questions and consider the different impacts and opportunities for that matter.
So my understanding is that you will be hearing the same information that we will be hearing, correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? Tamara, go ahead.
Hey, y'all. Got out of my car. Mark, thanks for the information. I just have one quick question. When I noticed, and you'll probably hear this theme from me a lot, I noticed in some of your documentation, there's no mention of retail in part of that plan. I see lots of more residential units and not a lot of retail, which is what a lot of the communities have been asking for, especially if we want to keep looking towards that, livable, walkable, commuter-friendly spaces that get us out of our cars. I'm just curious if that's going to be, if you can address that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. We looked at that right now. The question is really kind of taking it through the process, and I think we're open to looking at that. There is actually a little bakery on the first floor of the Days Inn.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, It does pretty well. And so, obviously when you redevelop a site, all those uses go away. And it's nice to be able to say, well, I wish they could just kind of freeze them in time and hopefully they'll come back. We don't know how that's going to work out. I guess, we're open to it. It's just kind of the question is, if we do that, are we creating new retail space that's going to compete with additional retail space that's further in this CBC or down Richmond Highway? And I don't know that we really, very much like actually a project we just got approved in Richmond Highway last week, which we have as part of that a retail bay with it. And it's going to be open and available if there's ever a market for it. And if someone wants to go there, yeah, I think we'd be open to doing something like that again here too. But even if we build it, that does not mean it's going to get populated. But, there's not an opposition to it, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
I think someone else had their hand raised.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I just had a short comment. I think it's a good idea for that corridor to have new buildings and new face of Richmond Highway. It will bring like a better a better lift to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Go ahead, Ray.
You're taking the building closer to Richmond Highway. Is the segment of Richmond Highway from the Beltway to North-South Kings Highway going to be redeveloped as it is from that point south with more lanes, but it won't have bus lanes because the bus is not going to be traveling there in a bus lane. What are the plans of that portion of the highway and how does that relate to your project?
Okay, I'll defer to Bob and Tom and those folks in terms of what the ultimate plans are. Right now, my understanding is there's not a lot planned for further widening of that portion of it. You're right, Ray. That's not part of the BRT. The BRT connects in over by down a little further south on Pendaw. Our goal is to provide whatever the right-of-way width is that the county wants. You know, so I mean, and again, it doesn't have to be just for travel lanes. Yeah, there'll be things to be the cycle track, bike lanes, you know, pathways and stuff like that. It's the whole thing. Actually, again, kind of recalling the project we just got approved last week. You know, that actually we provide the full right of width there. There actually are no additional vehicular travel lanes, but there's I think like 22 to 24 feet of additional right of way, which is tree planting strip, cycle track, another tree planting strip, then a bike, then a pathway, then another tree planting strip. Then there's what they call the building area, which really is almost just essentially the sidewalk next to the building. And so, you know, our goal is to provide whatever the right of way calls for there. I just think that the right of way there would be consistent with whatever the comp plan requirements are. But I don't think, and I'm looking, you know, maybe Bob, you can probably help me out because I'm struggling here a little bit. I don't think that there's any additional widening planned in that point. Or if there is, you know, we'll provide it, you know.
But you may be taking, the state may be taking that service road away and redesigning that portion of the roadway.
I guess, you know, on our wish list is taking that portion of the service lane away. I think that portion of the service lane is really not really used. I think the focus of the service lane really is kind of when you get to the light, between the light and north to Montebello is where that's more actively used. You get a little further south on there, you just don't have people kind of using that portion of the service lane. That's the one, you know, if you were to go down there now, you'll see it's mostly populated just by truck parking and stuff like that. So our goal is to do, and maybe we won't be able to do it too. You know, it's one of the things we can ask the VDOT to see if they want to change it, and the answer may be no. You know, and at the end of the day, it's just, you know, we're on step one. It would be nice to have the building frontage close to Richmond Highway and have more of a beautification frontage and the right of way, all including the bike lanes, the pathways, and all that stuff. That's consistent with what our goal is. You know, obviously VDOT gets a vote. You know.
Yep. This is Bob Pecora. I can chime in and help out Mark on his response. So the Richmond Highway corridor north of the Pendaw core area of the CBC, which is where we see the South Alex and the Walmart shopping center, all that. That is really the core there. This part of the Pendaw CBC is also where Mark's project is. So the widening of Richmond Highway, we don't see that as happening for like the BRT line, because the BRT line will be turning from Richmond Highway onto North Kings Highway via Shields Avenue. So it's not going up Richmond Highway towards Arlington or towards Alexandria that way. So we are looking at the cross section that is in the Richmond Highway corridor plan, which calls for amenities back of the curb, which would be where the service drive is. We're looking for a landscape panel, a bicycle path, and also pedestrian a pathway as well to match that. So that's something we'll be working with Mark Biani on that. We are not expecting that the transportation analysis with this project, with Barks project, is going to need an additional travel lane on Richmond Highway. Because of that, we're not looking to expand the right of way with additional travel lanes. We're going to work within the 6 lanes that are there currently. And the volumes that are on Richmond Highway are quite large, as you already know, but we don't expect that this project will have that much of an impact on the overall volumes of Richmond Highway.
I only bring that up also because of the fact that there is, and this may be an acceleration lane, I don't know, but turning south onto Richmond Highway from Huntington Avenue, there are 4 lanes going south, and then one of them magically disappears and causes problems with people trying to weave in. So I thought maybe that was a precursor to trying to widen Richmond Highway to 4 lanes further south.
Yeah.
Okay.
That area at Huntington Avenue is also a very congested intersection. So it's also pulling traffic from the Beltway. So it's transitioning from the Beltway down to Huntington Avenue and down south. So it's going from 4 to 3 to 3. So it's because of the volume at that intersection north of Huntington Avenue. Tom Burke is here. He can also respond.
I was just going to say 10 or so years ago, a lot of that section of Richmond Highway was upgraded, if you will, as part of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge project. Maybe been more than 10 years now, getting older. But yeah, so I recall a lot of that going kind of up the hill was widened, but you're right, then they drop. So I think that probably meant that they found the need for additional capacity coming out of the Huntington intersection. But we're not going to widen to 8.
Yeah, Ray, I say just from a design perspective, I guess, yeah, the goal of our worst case scenario is for us to provide this beautiful new street frontage, the landscaping package, all the rest of that stuff, and then have 18-wheelers and food trucks parking right in front of it, you know? And so hopefully we can get ourselves to a way, common sense, that we kind of eliminate that, because, you know, I think that would kind of defeat a large purpose of what we're planning on doing in terms of the street frontage. But at the end of the day, we'll work with the county, we'll work with the community, you know, I think we'll be able to come up with a good solution.
Thanks for the answers.
I think Mary had her hand up next. Mary Payton.
Mary, you're on mute. We can't hear you, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I don't have a hand up.
Okay, sorry about that. Thought there was one other person. But... No? Okay.
See, Garrett has his hand up. Garrett?
Yeah, this is Garrett. I have a hand up. I was just gonna, and Ray, I appreciate you asking the question. And Mark was probably gonna talk to you about this at some point anyway, but we don't need a full dive into it. But I think one of the things our neighborhood is thinking about is that turn from Richmond Highway right onto Fairhaven, and how that could possibly, you know, slinky and get tied up there, turning into this new development as well. So just, you know, as we look at this further down the road, just kind of taking that into account. But I agree with everything you're saying about that service access road, what it is today and its need. I mean, it pretty much dies there going into the pool. It's like crumbled asphalt at that point. And hopefully some of those 18-wheelers will go away, because I think some of them are staying at the Days Inn, so we might have a natural relief there anyway. So just
you can see it in the air on the aerials when you get about halfway through the pool site. It's basically turned to dirt at this point.
Yeah.
I think Tamara.
Yeah, I just have I have one more question while I'm looking at this, and I know we'll get to the rest later, but you know, adding 336 units or whatever that is, and then if you add to city side what the planned development there is, and then you add what's happening across the street, and when we start talking about traffic, I don't know how many of you get the fun events of sitting in one of those intersections about 4 to 6 o'clock. And I know that we're not trying to solve VDOT's problems, but back to my request to consider some ways that we can shop. I'm just I'll keep asking that question because we're talking about adding potentially over 1,000 units of people to come into that area, and traffic is already horrible.
Maura, I'll just say one thing regarding that. One of the benefits of this kind of regular cycle of SSPA is that we're able, in some instances, to be able to review proposals like these two at the same time, right? And so that opportunity to kind of look at the bigger picture and look at potential for coordination, for example, it doesn't always work out, but there is this potential for this, this type of coordination and being able to look at not just individual sites in isolation, but what could be kind of in a bigger, grander sense, and how that the introduction of certain uses might require certain other kinds of facilities and amenities. So I think we're right there with you, and we'll be taking a look at that as we do the land use analysis in subsequent meetings for sure.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to add something else on the transportation analysis that FCDOT will review with both Mark Viani and with Brian's on the city side, the rezoning application. We'll be looking at transportation from the vehicular perspective, but we're also looking at bike and pedestrian, looking at any of those facilities or amenities that need to be included. We're looking at transit, and we're also looking at safety. So it's a multimodal transportation analysis. So it's more comprehensive than we've done in the past. But we are looking at it with Mark and Brian for both projects, that accounting for both projects and the impacts to the area, but also looking at where we can propose mitigations and work with them on providing those. So we'll have more details as the analysis gets forward and as more meetings come up. So there'll be a transportation discussion in the future, and we'll be taking more questions at that time. But if you have questions tonight, we're jotting those down. We're also recording those, so we'll be able to respond tonight and as well as in the future. Thanks.
Okay, I have a question now.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
It's the map question. Does this development include the Moon Inn property or not?
It does not. Yeah. No, the Moon Inn came in initially as his own SSPA, and then I forgot who was the Michaels company, maybe was doing that one, and then they withdrew. So that was a separate ownership group.
Okay, so that parcel might be developed separately someday.
Well, think about that. That was initially proposed, I think, for 100 units of affordable. Yeah, the Michaels were going to do with it, which actually was not a bad use of the property, but they withdrew, so that did not go forward.
Okay.
So we will be, leaving that adopted plan recommendation as it is.
And that being said, Mary, as you know, we have the regular SSPA cycle. So if they wanted to resubmit in a future cycle, if they were able to get a developer that was interested in participating, they could do so, at a future date. But I don't believe that we'll be reviewing it as a part of this cycle.
Okay, Leah, do you want to give the existing conditions for the city side?
Thanks, everybody, for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay. So Cityside Huntington. This is the second plan amendment that we're talking about today and that you'll all be reviewing. This is within the Mount Vernon Supervisor District and located on the west side of Richmond Highway, south of Huntington Avenue and east of Mount Eagle Park. The property is currently developed with 4 high-rise residential buildings consisting of 569 multifamily units on 14.92 acres of land. And then just zooming out, looking at the surrounding areas, the subject site is approximately a 0.7 mile walking distance to the Huntington Metro Station, but it does pass through that through Montebello Eagle Park, which does close at night. It's also half a mile walk to the future bus rapid transit station planned for the intersection of Richmond Highway and South Kings Highway. And then just looking around to the west is Mount Eagle Park. And then the north is the Montebello condominiums. To the east, across Richmond Highway, are hotels and a restaurant. And then to the south is the hotel and swimming pool, which is part of the PennDOT CBC plan amendment, which we just discussed. And then zooming back in, our views along Richmond Highway, and then the trail connection in the back of Cityside leading to the Mount Eagle Park, and then towards the Huntington Metro Station as well. And then, you know, you can't notice in the picture, but from the previous discussions, there is a steep gradual upslope from Richmond Highway to the rear of the site. And we did walk it, and it's very, it's a big gain. And then the property is planned. So again, the property is planned within the Mount Vernon District Planning District, MV1 Huntington Community Planning Sector, specifically located within Land Unit Q of the Huntington Transit Station area. And then the green dash lines highlights the Huntington Transit Development Area, and Land Unit Q is directly abutting that area. And then the adopted comprehensive plan for the subject property recommends residential use at 35 to 40 dwelling units per acre. And this currently reflects the build out of both the Montebello and the Cityside Huntington developments. And then just to go over what the board authorized with this plan amendment, this nomination was submitted as part of the 2022-2023 SSPA nomination process, which led to the board authorization back in April 11th of this year. And the board requested that staff evaluate a plan amendment for residential use at 50 to 65 dwelling units per acre. And just a little bit of background, the nominator acquired the property with financing that included an investment from the Amazon Housing Equity Fund, and it tends to ensure that the property remains a committed long-term affordable housing community. So that means the existing units will be retained and preserved, and then the new units above the current plan will be committed to long-term affordable housing as well. And then just to reiterate that this proposal may qualify under the Affordable Housing Preservation Administrative Guidelines, which were adopted in September 26th of this year. And if so, then a plan amendment may not be required, but that's also pending additional information from the nominator. And if that is the case, the community will still be able to participate and provide feedback during the rezoning stage. So if it doesn't need a plan amendment, this will not be, you know, your last time to provide feedback or to see it. And then if Brian's here, I'm going to turn it over to you to go over your presentation.
I am here. Good evening, everyone. It's Brian Winterhalter with DLA Piper. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Aaron and Graham, for organizing this meeting. Appreciate the opportunity. I guess I'll pull up my presentation and share my screen here and run through this relatively quickly. We have only a few slides to share with you all, especially because Leah, you've described the concept very well, and you covered most of the information that I wanted to cover, but I will go through this. First, I would like to say that Nick Bracco with Lincoln Avenue Capital wasn't able to be here for this meeting and sends his regrets and apologies. He's out of town right now and couldn't be here for this meeting. But just so you all know, if you're not already familiar, Lincoln Avenue Capital is a mission-driven affordable housing company. They are active in many states across the United States. They have 122 properties, approximately 22,000 units, and they develop, own, operate, manage affordable housing communities and other residential communities across the country. So with respect to the Cityside Huntington property specifically, as Leah noted, it was an acquisition that Lincoln Avenue Capital made. It was in December of 2021, and it was in partnership with Amazon and their Housing Equity Fund. As part of the acquisition and the investment by Amazon related to its affordable housing initiatives in connection with HQ2, there are long-term affordability restrictions in place by covenant on the property already today. And you see on the screen, those covenant restrictions require 50% of the existing units to be up to 70% of area median income and 50% of the units to be rented at up to 80% of area median income. So those are the existing covenants and the existing long-term affordability levels for the 569 units on the property. As Leah mentioned, as part of our proposed development concept, we are maintaining all of those units, those existing buildings. There is no displacement of any existing residents as part of our proposed project. Here's an overview of the site, and our proposed development is fronting along the Richmond Highway portion of the property. It includes 2 new residential buildings with additional parking. The proposal is for up to 350 additional multifamily units split between Building A and Building B at 225 units and 125 units, as you see on the screen. The objective for the additional units on the property is to limit the affordability to 60% of area median income and below. So the overall concept is we have the 569 units that are at 70% and 80% of AMI. And the effort here with the proposed new additional buildings is to provide a full complement of affordable housing at a range of AMIs up to 60% of AMI for the new development. Those will be long-term affordability restrictions as well. So those would be committed affordable housing as part of the county's affordable dwelling unit program. Here is an image, a rendering of what this concept may look like. You see the buildings here fronting on Richmond Highway. We are in the very early stages of some discussions that we've had with the county staff and look forward to continuing about the use of the service road. And so a lot of what you've heard already and discussed about the service road would probably apply as well to our site. We're certainly open to that. We haven't assumed any changes to the service road in our concept, but we're certainly willing to consider changes that would include additional streetscape, bike lanes, landscaping, moving the buildings closer to front on Richmond Highway if that were desirable. So we're certainly open to those discussions as well. This is also a helpful slide to point out that there is an existing building that we are referring to as sort of the hole in the donut, if you will. We have been coordinating with the ownership of that building, and we are looking to see if we can come up with a coordinated development plan that would incorporate that parcel and then potentially involve a non-residential component in the ground floor of one of the residential buildings. Part of the reason that we haven't advanced more detailed discussions about whether we are or are not required to have a comprehensive plan amendment and continue through the SSPA process is because it's incumbent on us as the nominator to come forward with a plan that includes that overall consolidation. We're actively working on that. I think we're getting close, but it's not quite yet ready for presentation to you all or to the county. And so we are very eager to be able to move forward with that, but we're not quite there yet with the owner and need some further discussions on that point. So I think once we have some of those additional discussions and we have more detailed information to provide to everyone on this discussion on the task force and the county staff as well, we're certainly happy to do that. And we will then proceed to a more specific evaluation of whether our proposal is consistent with the affordable housing preservation policy that was adopted by the board that Leah mentioned already, and the newly adopted administrative guidelines as of last week. And so we're looking forward to continuing that discussion and ultimately reaching a conclusion on that question. We're hopeful that we can proceed to the rezoning application stage without needing a comprehensive plan amendment, quite honestly. But nevertheless, we certainly would come back to you all, although not in the form of an SSPA nomination and a comprehensive plan review, but with a rezoning application. And we can jump, if we're able to do that, we can jump right into all of the detailed discussions and all the things that you'd be interested in talking about as part of any rezoning application, and the full complement of review for traffic and impact on schools and parks and other public facilities, the design of the project, and so on. So all that would obviously be part of the rezoning application. And if we're able to move forward with that, we certainly want to get that moving, and we'd be back to you when we are ready to do that. That's about all I have for our presentation. I promised that would be brief, so I'll stop talking. Thanks for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Brian. It looks like Mary Payton, you have your hand up. I think you're muted again. Oh.
Okay, good. If this is all affordable housing, what does the affordable housing preservation guidelines have to do with it? What is the issue about conforming with them?
It's not an issue of conforming with the guidelines as such. It's more about, are we under the affordable housing preservation policy? If you commit to preserving existing affordable housing on a property, then there is an opportunity to add additional development on the property without needing a comprehensive plan amendment. That was part of the structure of the affordable housing preservation policy, in order to encourage the preservation of market rate affordable housing. And so to back that up a step, when Lincoln Avenue Capital acquired the property, it was at that time not committed affordable housing. It wasn't committed by covenant. It wasn't committed under the county's affordable housing programs. They weren't ADUs in the formal program. It was market rate affordable housing. And as part of the acquisition of the property with the investment from Amazon, the property is now subject to covenants that maintain long-term affordability. And that component is consistent with the affordable housing preservation policy that would allow additional development on the site without a comprehensive plan amendment.
So you're talking about developing market rate on the site, or only the?
No, yeah. So there will be no market rate development on this site between the existing units and our proposed units. So the existing units will continue to be at 50%, I'm sorry, at 50% of those existing units at 70% of AMI, and 50% of those units at 80% of AMI. That's the existing development, the existing 569 units. The proposed development of approximately 350 units would be at a range from 30% to 60% of AMI.
Okay, that was my second question, is was there a range?
Yes.
And then how long is the affordability commitment? Is it
That
15?
affordability commitment would be per the county's affordable housing policies. And that would be the standard ADU commitments. So, I mean, that would be like essentially in perpetuity.
Oh, okay. So this isn't a LIHTC.
It is a LIHTC deal, but what typically happens is those are the affordability and the LIHTC deals are typically extended.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
We do have some questions in the chat. Susan asked, buildings A and B for city side, how many stories will these potential buildings be?
So we are contemplating, and the renderings that I showed you depict 10-story buildings. That's consistent with the building height of the existing buildings on the property. So no taller than what is there. I will also tell you, however, that there is a possibility that the height of the proposed buildings may come down, and also the number of units may come down as part of our ongoing discussions with the owner of the property in between the two buildings. And we're still working on that. There's two different things at play here. One is the potential design changes if we are able to utilize that hole in the donut property. with the coordination with that owner. That I think we will ultimately get there, but it's not quite yet finalized. So that's one piece that would affect the design of the site, and obviously we'd come back to you when we have a more detailed design, which we're looking forward to doing hopefully soon. And then the second piece is that, quite candidly, there was interest from Amazon at the time that the acquisition was made, that there would be a further investment in the property as part of the new development on the site. And what at least we're hearing from Amazon more recently is that their ability to do that may be more limited than it was previously. And the why and the how and the inner workings of Amazon and their housing equity fund is all beyond me and over my head. But all I know is that they may not be able to be participating in the sort of second phase of this project or property. And so that may drive a lower overall unit count. So if I had to make a prediction, I would say it's actually more likely than not that the height of the buildings and the number of units will come down a bit.
And then there was another question in the chat from Maria. Where are going to be the lights to get in and out from those buildings, including Montebello, where I reside? Are you planning to get rid of the side road? What about Dominion? Will they be able to supply what is needed without adding generators?
So those are all good questions that we don't yet have an answer to at this stage of the process. We're certainly interested in coordinating with you all and with County DOT on vehicular circulation, what to do with the service road, what's the most appropriate use for that area. And we're open to suggestions on what everybody would like to see happen with the service road. And with respect to traffic circulation, as I think someone mentioned earlier, obviously there would be a traffic study as part of the proposal, and certainly with the rezoning application, there would be the very detailed traffic study that we would do to analyze all of those things. And then in terms of the power, that's a good question, and I frankly don't know the answer to that off the top of my head at this stage, but we can certainly get an answer for you.
And then she also had another question about where the school bus is going to stop.
So we've heard that question, and I, as I mentioned, Nick unfortunately wasn't able to join today. He was going to ask, there were a couple of things that he was going to ask the sort of on the ground property management folks about, some of those questions about how that's operating now and what we would suggest for going forward. So I'll have to get back to you on that one as well. But we have heard that question, and we will make sure that we have an answer for you.
And then Peter, I saw that you've had your hand up for a while. Would you like to go next?
Yes. Brian, the person before me raised most of the questions that I was going to raise as a member of the Mount Vernon Council, but also representative of the Montebello Neighborhood Improvement Committee. Your folks, your property line shows that you own the service road. That's a state highway. And Virginia Department of Transportation has repaved it. I happen to know that because I was the guy who had to deal for over 2 years with VDOT to get it paved. The other point that I want to reiterate or add my voice to is we're already gridlocked on the service road at the traffic light with the school buses, and at the north end, there's an unsignalized exit. That's referred to locally as Death Alley. You have to try to cross 2 6 5 to 6 active lanes of traffic, either to, depending on whether you're entering from heading north or exiting coming south, or if you're leaving Montebello or City Side. Very, very, very dangerous. And if the school bus is there, you're backed up onto Richmond Highway routinely. It takes 12, 15, 20 minutes for that whole school bus to empty, and it's not the only one. So I think they're going to need to spend some serious time and thought about putting an additional 350 units, potentially 10 stories, next to Montebello has over 2,200 residents, and our back gate is closer to Metro, and we have a shuttle bus. City Side does not have a shuttle bus. The walk is longer, and I think perhaps you are underestimating how significant the traffic impact is for all of us in this area. It's a mess sometimes now. With what you're proposing here, it looks like it's going to be a nightmare. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. If you all refer to it as Death Alley, then my hope optimistically is that we can do something better. And we're happy to look at that and review it all with you. And obviously, as I mentioned, we will be doing the detailed traffic analysis as part of the rezoning. So that will certainly be part of those discussions, and we look forward to working with you all and seeing what potential solutions we can come up with.
Yeah, one more comment.
Sure.
Thank you. It's a huge concern to the 2,200 people who live here.
Yeah, we understand, and we appreciate it. The fact that we haven't yet done the traffic study and we don't yet have more detailed answers doesn't mean that we don't understand and appreciate your concern. We certainly do. We know it's a question or an issue and a hot topic of conversation. It's something that you all have to deal with in your kind of regular day. And we, like I said, I think, the benefit here is there's an opportunity for us to look in a coordinated fashion with a number of sites in this area and what we can do to make things better. And we're certainly happy to engage in that conversation with you and see what we can do.
As a personal aside, back in '71, when I returned from Vietnam, I lived in 6038 Richmond Highway, and there was virtually no development on that part of the highway. And even then, it was risky exiting what was then Bellhaven Towers. And that was a market rate property. It was not a AMI property. So the original 4 towers were market rate. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Peter, I'll just add one thing. On the staff end, on the county staff end, we've had a number of discussions with John Candle, as well as with the NBCCA about this specific issue, and Bob and Kyle and Tom, I believe, as well as the DPD staff. We've conducted one site visit already to kind of take a look specifically at the intersection that you're describing, or the 2 intersections, excuse me, including the one that's unsignalized further down towards Montebello. So we're very aware that this is an issue of interest, and we're hopeful that we can have further discussions that are informed by the traffic analysis in the future. Bob, you want to add anything in there in particular? I just wanted to flag it that we're very aware, and we'll be taking a look at it as a part of the project.
Graham, you took the words out of my mouth. Thanks.
Sorry.
But that's exactly what I was going to say. So,
Yeah.
And we'll be working, like I said before, with Brian and Mark on the transportation analysis for both projects. So we're definitely going to be looking at that intersection north of Montebello, the unsignalized version, as well as the signalized intersections in this area adjacent to the projects.
Yeah, thank you. I was with John Candell when he met with your folks.
I
John-
remember.
Yeah,
I remember.
John would have been here. Unfortunately, he's on travel and sends his regrets, but he's not. He's out of the country. So thank you all very much. We
Yeah.
appreciate your concerns.
Yeah, and thanks for your comments tonight. We appreciate that. Just reinforces that we still need to look at that intersection. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Let's go to Mary and then Ray.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to say I hope you can solve the traffic problems, because we really do need a big influx of affordable housing. I know people say we have too much, but we won't for long, because I've followed the preservation guidelines through their many iterations, and I think there's some really big loopholes in them that will apply to Richmond Highway, and we're probably going to lose an awful lot of affordable housing. And I think having new, strong, new, committed affordable housing is going to be a real plus for us, and we really need it. So thank you for locating here.
Yeah, we agree. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ray.
Okay, earlier it looked like I had 3 hands up, but I really only have 2. I don't know what those numbers mean, but the question I have is in regard to the back of the property. And the previous presentation, we saw a sloped area with some trees. Does this property, refresh my memory, have a large retaining wall in the back? And if so, how high is that right now? I remember a large concrete retaining wall somewhere along this area.
I don't know how high.
The Days Inn property does have a retaining wall.
I was gonna say, I don't
Okay.
know how high that wall is, but I'm trying to think. I don't think that wall extends onto the sort
No,
of
it
back
doesn't.
frontage of the city side property.
Right.
It does
So-
it does slope up, and then the trail goes to the metro station, through the park into the metro station.
Okay, so the retaining wall is on the Days Inn property right now. All right, thanks.
Yeah, the city side, this is Tamara, y'all. We walk our dogs back there a lot. The city side property goes right into Mount Eagle Park. So there's a little bit of a fence back there in the wooded area that is part of the I guess the south end of that park. But it's the Days Inn property further down that has the bigger wall with the neighborhood that's actually up above it. Fairhaven.
And then there was one last question in the chat, was from Tamara. Consideration of retail offerings, are these being considered?
It is being considered. If we are able to do the coordinated plan with the small building and utilize that parcel, the likelihood is, if that coordination comes to fruition, which we certainly hope it does, that there would be a non-residential component in one of the 2 proposed buildings. We're not exactly sure what form, how big that space will be and what it would or could be. But there is certainly a possibility, and it's certainly under consideration, to have some kind of retail component be part of the project, but that is yet to be determined.
Thanks, Brian. And, I appreciate that. One of the things we keep hearing from all the developers on this whole area is that people keep promising that they will build retail, and we still have none, because there's always some reason why, one reason or the other. And I'm guessing you're trying to find, and you don't have to speak to this, but I can only guess you're trying to find a way to move that building and move them into part of that, one of those new buildings that you're going to build. Which I know I'm not asking you to answer that, but that's the only assumption that I could make. But again, we're cramming a lot of people into a very dense area close to a metro. And after living through COVID here in my little house, with not having walkable retail, we have a couple of places now, including a nice little Mexican restaurant that's here on Huntington, that's always packed. And really the only grocery store that we have that's walkable is the new Aldi, which is not, for our older residents, that's not a walkable distance to a grocery store. So that's one of the things that I know our community is concerned about, that we are adding more and more density. And, I can't remember how many units that Cityside currently has right now. But adding all of these people together, there has to be some way that we can get some retail, because again, some of the way the traffic issues will go down is when people don't have to use their cars. And the only way to get people to not use their cars is to give us places to go so we can walk or bike. So I'm just asking, I'll keep asking the same question because I think it's something that we need to talk about. And thanks again for your time.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your comments. We appreciate it. I would love to be able to commit to a retail location as part of the project. I don't know if we're going to be able to make that commitment. It's early for us to be, quite at that stage, quite honestly. But like I said, we are trying to figure out how we can coordinate with Andros and the ownership there, and incorporate something into our project. And we're not entirely sure yet exactly what that's going to look like. So there's some options, and we'll see where that takes us. I mean, you won't be surprised to hear that part of what that ultimately looks like might be in part up to Andros, rather than us, and the willingness to coordinate with us and put something together that we can move forward with in a coordinated fashion. So it's not totally under our control. But nevertheless, I think it's a good opportunity. I think we're certainly interested in it, and we will be back with you soon, and we'll let you know, hopefully sooner rather than later, the results of that and what we're able to do.
Okay, are there any other questions at this point? All right, why don't we move to the last slide? So the next task force meeting will be November 14th, and this is when we'll be presenting the first round of impact analyses to you. As I mentioned, there is flexibility in the schedule. If we need to spend more time on a particular analysis discussion, then we can always add meetings to the schedule. Right now, we do have one carryover meeting included in the schedule at the end, but if we need additional meetings, we can always adjust the schedule. So, and here is our contact information. In the meantime, just feel free to reach out to either Leah or myself if you have any questions in the meantime, and we look forward to working with you. And thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.